Today's video contains subject matter that may be sensitive to some viewers, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you would like to send my way, just go to astheravendreams.com. And of course, thank you. Back when I was about 16 years old, I had a scary experience with a customer at my job. Although not super important to the story, at the time this happened, I was working as a pharmacy technician at a well-known retail pharmacy in my area. It was my first job, and I had only been working for a couple of months at this point, so I was still getting used to interacting with customers. On the day that it happened, it was relatively busy. I was moving through the customers relatively quickly, using my well-rehearsed motto to greet each customer. "Hi, welcome to the place. How can I help you?" You know, the usual stuff. I was halfway through the line when this one man stepped up to the front. He looked like he was probably in his early to mid-20s. He was tall, skinny, and had dirty blonde hair. He also looked like he had kind of a grunge aesthetic going on, as he was wearing a black beanie and a black leather jacket over a band t-shirt, with chain necklaces and gauges. But I think the first thing I noticed about him was the eyeball tattoo that he had on his hand. It kind of looked like the one on top of the pyramid on the back of the dollar bill. It was a pretty unusual tattoo, which I think is why it caught my eye so quickly. I greeted him as I did any other customer, but his reply took me by surprise. "Hi, welcome to name of the place. How can I help you?" "You're cute. Can I get your number?" I was taken completely off guard by this. He didn't say it in a creepy way or anything. It was just very upfront and matter of fact, which I think is why it startled me so much. At that point, I've never had a stranger ask for my number before, and certainly never in such a brazen way. So, out of shock and stupidity, I blurted out, "Oh, yeah, okay," in response. Please don't ask me why I did this. It's not like he was super ugly or anything like that, but the fact that he had tattoos already gave away that he was already too old for me. In my state, you need to be 18 to get a tattoo, and I wasn't really looking to mingle at that point. I think I just blurted it out because of the shock. I was also a pretty big people pleaser at the time, so that probably played into it as well. So here I was with his phone in my hand, realizing that it was way too late to turn back and tell him that I had changed my mind. So, in another act of complete idiocracy, I decided the best course of action was to put a fake number into his phone. This idea was stupid as hell, and I know that now. The whole situation that followed could have been avoided had I just told him no to begin with, or used the classic "I have a boyfriend" excuse. Honestly, I think I was just scared, and I wanted the whole ordeal to end as quickly as possible, without the need for confrontation, and in my frazzled, anxiety-ridden state, giving him a fake number seemed like the best way to do it. Luckily, he didn't check his phone to see if the number worked at that moment, so I was able to get his medication and ring him out without any problems. We didn't really talk while I was ringing him out. We just kind of went through the motions of a normal exchange at the pharmacy. He was wearing a mask, so I couldn't see his facial expressions, but he did stare at me quite a bit. After the transaction ended, he bid me farewell and promised to text me later. I just kind of chuckled nervously in response and nodded my head. My heart was pounding for a while afterwards, but after an hour or two went by with no incident, I just assumed that he took the hint and was going to leave me alone. Boy, was I wrong. A couple more hours went by, and it was later in the evening. My pharmacist went on break, so it was just me and the two other younger technicians taking care of things. It was pretty dead, so we were just talking amongst ourselves in the back. Then I heard someone yelling at the front desk. Hey, you! I turned around, and my heart dropped into my stomach when I saw the man with the eyeball tattoo standing at the front counter, looking like he was about to flip his lid. I can think of a few times in my life that I've been that scared, and my fear only heightened when he told me to come here and waved over with his finger. I complied, only to seem less suspicious. I walked over to him calmly and asked him what was up. Did you give me a fake number? I could hear the fury in his voice, and it was obvious that he was speaking through gritted teeth. I insisted that I didn't know what he was talking about, and that there must have been a mistake. We went back and forth like this for a while, with me denying that I ever gave him a fake number, and him explaining that he knows I did, because when he texted me, the number bounced. Finally, after a while of arguing, he seemed to start to believe me, and he calmed down. He handed me his phone again so I could re-enter the number. The issue was that, after that whole ordeal, I knew that I definitely did not want to put my real number into his phone. The dude was obviously a nut job. I understand he must have been angry at being lied to, and I know that I should have been straight up with the dude, but him coming out of his way to return to the store and confront me was just a huge red flag. Even naive 16-year-old me could see that. Plus, the fact that he had already added the heart eyes emoji around my name in his phone was super creepy to me. Finally, my brain decided to start working again and produce intelligent thoughts, because the next plan I came up with is what inevitably saved me from this situation in the end. When he handed me his phone, I tried to look as calm and nonchalant as possible. I started to type in a number before stopping to look up at him with a blank expression and say coolly, "Oh yeah, one thing. I'm 16. Is that going to be a problem?" I've never seen a look of shock quite like the one that spread across his face at that moment. His eyes grew to the size of dinner plates, and he just let out this long, "Oh." That told me all I needed to know. I slowly handed him his phone back with a, "Yeah." And he mumbled something that I didn't really hear before he turned around and got the heck out of there. The wave of relief that I felt in that moment was nothing like I have ever felt before. My knees buckled underneath me as my adrenaline rush reached its end. My coworkers consoled me and told me that I should report him to the pharmacy manager. I told them I would if he ever came back, but I never saw him again after that, so I didn't really see it as necessary. Plus, I didn't even know the guy's name. The identifying feature I remembered about him was the eyeball tattoo on his hand. So, the moral of the story is, don't give fake numbers to guys unless you can get away with it. And to the man with the eyeball tattoo, I hope we never see each other again. This happened a few years ago. My husband and I live in a 3-storied apartment with a covered garage as the first floor, a building at the time. There were a total of 21 or 22 flats in the building, and each apartment had an associated parking lot in the covered garage on the first floor. One could enter the apartment building either through the garage doors one for coming into the garage and one for exiting, or through either of the main entrances, one that led to the elevator and the other that led to the stairs. In order to enter via these doors, one needed to have a key like all the residents did, or they had to be buzzed in by a resident. Each resident had a remote clicker to open the garage door to let them enter with their vehicle. Once you were in the garage, you could access any part of the building without a key or without being buzzed in. The layout of the garage was in a U shape. You entered via the right tip of the U and parked your car in your assigned spot. To exit, you drove all the way to the left tip of the U and exited the garage from that end by using the clicker. So, anyways, let's come back to the Friday evening in question when this incident took place. My husband and I decided to go out to grab a pizza and some drinks, and get them back with us home so we could enjoy them as we watched a movie. When we were about a minute away from our apartment with the food, there was a car that turned on the same road as us. It continued behind us after our car took another turn. We didn't think much of this, as this road was very busy all the time, despite being an inner street. As we approached our apartment garage, my husband, who was driving our car, clicked the button on the clicker to let us into the garage. Since he clicked it a few moments before we were directly in front of the garage door, we didn't have to wait, and we drove in immediately. As soon as we were in, we realized that the car behind us had also entered our garage. It didn't look familiar to us. We'd been living in the apartment for over a year at that point, and there were a limited number of flats and their corresponding cars. This unknown car that had entered behind us followed us until our assigned parking spot and parked in the spot directly next to ours. Now, this is where my husband immediately got suspicious. He told me that this was definitely not the car that usually was parked next to ours. We decided to not get out of our car immediately. By now, the suspicious car was directly next to us, and we were able to clearly see the person at the wheel. It was a guy possibly in his late 20s. My husband looked at this guy in the eye as our cars sat side by side. I also looked over at the guy suspiciously from the passenger seat. The moment this happened, the guy started his car back on and reversed it out of the parking space. He turned toward the exit of the garage, but wasn't able to get out of the garage as he did not have a clicker. So he just sat there, near the exit in his car. We were watching all of this from our car, from our parking spot. Since the stranger was still inside our garage, I didn't feel safe enough to leave the security of the car. Finally, we decided to get out and rush home to our apartment. The stranger was still waiting near the exit when we went up to our apartment. We both agreed that this guy sneaking into our apartment garage behind us, briefly parking in a private space, and then trying to just leave was creepy and suspicious. We weren't quite sure what we should do next. I remember being scared and double locking our door. I called up our building super and narrated the incident to him. He lived near the building and said that he would arrive shortly. Since we were hungry, we ate the pizza, but weren't able to relax. Upon going down to the garage to check to see if the strange guy was still inside, we saw that he was no longer there. The super came along, and upon checking the CCTV footage of him, we saw that the strange guy had waited for a while, but left upon figuring out a way to get out of the garage, possibly by pressing a button next to the exit door inside the garage. It was an extremely unsettling encounter. This encounter happened this late afternoon. I'm still very shaken up about this and cannot get it out of my mind, so bear with me. My day started as it normally does. Early morning work shift, come home, drive my partner to work, come home to nap. However, when I got home, my partner texted me saying to pick them back up because they just got news they were laid off for the winter due to a very slow season. I went back out, came back and went for my nap while my partner went to play video games. I was in a pretty deep sleep with my favorite TV show playing as background that I've seen a million times. About 2 hours or so later, I'm woken up to my creaky front door being opened, followed by a deep and unfamiliar, "Hello?" I listened intently as I thought it could be my partner's friend, who often stops by. I didn't hear anything further, so I shrugged it off to my TV and tried to go back to sleep. Shortly after that, I hear my partner open their bedroom door and I hear them yell, "Who the hell are you and why are you in my house?" I panic, as I don't know who they're talking to, but I listen to the short interaction. An older man, very startled by my partner's presence, explained that he had watched a package be delivered, and after no one came to get the package right away, he decided to come inside. The package was still on my porch afterward. My partner tells the stranger who had been walking directly towards my bedroom to leave, and that they were calling the police. The man lingers, stalling my partner, and asks if he can use our bathroom. They say, "No, get out!" And the man slowly makes his way out and drives away. We called the police immediately after he left, giving them his vehicle descriptions. I called my neighbor to let him know to keep an eye out, and he informed me that when he came home 2 to 3 hours earlier, that vehicle was parked at the end of our street, and when he drove by, the man had covered his face. I can't stop thinking that this man knows my schedule and has targeted me for something. But I'm so lucky that, today of all days, I was not home alone. I was sitting alone at a bus stop at 9 p.m. in a fairly crowded area when out of my peripheral vision, I see someone walk towards the bus stop and just stand there on the side for a bit. And the person starts circling the bus stop, which strikes me as odd, but not necessarily concerning. When the bus arrives, I get on and notice the guy does not. But as the bus starts moving, he starts running parallel with it, then makes eye contact with me and gets on at the next stop. This is off a main street, and the stops in this section are only a couple of blocks apart. Now, I'm actually starting to feel kind of freaked out. I keep an eye on his movement and note that he sits 3 rows behind me on the opposite side of the aisle. Not wanting to inadvertently make eye contact, I turn forwards but try to keep him in the corner of my eye. After the bus starts moving again, I sense movement, and I think in a joking manner, if that's that weirdo relocating to sit behind me. I turn back a little just to check, and feel a sudden sinking feeling when it is actually him. Now, I am scared. Not wanting to have him out of my direct line of vision, I look at him so he can see that I do in fact notice him, and that I now know his face. I get up, and I stand at the back door of the bus, which is right behind his seat, and I stare directly at the back of his head, hoping it sends the message that I'll get confrontational in the public setting if he tries to do anything. I get off a couple of stops early before my actual destination, start slowly walking in the opposite direction of where I live, and make sure he hasn't also gotten off. Fortunately, he doesn't. After the bus moves on with the creep still on it, I start walking home with pepper spray in hand, while being extra vigilant in case he got off at any stops up ahead and tried to follow me from there. To my relief, I don't see him when I get to my building, and I rush inside. If he had been there, I would have walked past my building and gone inside a restaurant at the next block to get help. And of course use the pepper spray if he got close. I'm sure it depends on the situation, but sometimes direct acknowledgement of a creeper's presence can act as a deterrent. I went to a small-sized school that had K through 12 in a huge building that circled a statue. So, on one side of the statue, that was elementary school, and the other was middle/high school. Middle school and high school had different bell systems, but we all shared the same teachers for certain classes. Gym was one of those classes. A mix of middle and high school kids. I was a freshman at the time. We had a teacher who was called Mr. Fouts. He was a small, muscular guy. I stood over him, and at first he was a super chill dude. Everyone loved the guy, even the teachers did. I didn't see the hype in the dude, but he was okay. I never got a creepy vibe with him. It wasn't until we had to do some sprints or whatever, and I was pretty good at it, that he had me come after class to discuss a few things with me. I did, and he wanted me to join the girls' cross-country team. It said I was exceptional and could use a runner like me. I told him I wasn't interested in playing, even though I did like running, and he was okay with the fact that I was on the fence about it. He then told me how my speed would help get the team to some contest or whatever, and also said how nice I ran. I didn't think much of this, but I told him I would consider it. Over the course of a few days, he started to talk to me more often, and then stared at me, and we did more running activities than normal. Girls were always on him, and whenever he asked me to see him after class, there was at least 2 girls in his office. He never let off me joining cross-country, so I started to bug my parents. There was an event at my school which my parents would have an opportunity to meet him. I presented Mr. Fouts to my parents, and didn't notice anything weird. But after they chatted, my stepdad pulled me to the side and said that I wasn't going to join cross-country, and that I need to switch out of gym. I was mad and confused. I asked why, and he said until we get home he would tell me. When we got home, he told me that he doesn't trust Mr. Fouts. He seemed like a predator, and the reason why was because they were talking. Mr. Fouts turned to check out a few girls who were passing by. Then, he mentioned how nice I ran. My form, the way my legs looked as I ran, said I had the perfect body for a runner. I was in disbelief, and I told my dad to stick it where the sun doesn't shine. He was hysterical, and told me to open my eyes and look closer. I did hate my dad at that moment for being overly protective and dismissing the fact that Mr. Fouts was just a well-liked guy. But after that, I noticed the little things. He looked at me up and down. He always found a way to pull me out of class to talk to him about my parents. He started to call me Lolita, like the book. And then the final straw, He had me come in after class. I went to his office, and it was just the two of us. I asked him what he wanted, and he had me sit down. He was disheveled looking, and the office was dim. He asked me again if my parents had reconsidered. I told him no, and he chuckled. I was feeling uneasy and scared. He got up and sat next to me, told me that I had a big opportunity in cross country, and then proceeded to tell me how nice my legs were, how fit my body was as he talked in a sexy whispering voice. He put his hand on my shoulder and it slowly moved down my back. I was feeling awful at that point, and I told him as clear as day, I'm not doing cross country. I have other important things to do. I stood up and left. I was scared and feeling gross. I went to my next class, and I spent it going over in my head what had happened. I didn't think to go to the school office or anything because he had the whole school on his side. I didn't tell my stepdad because I didn't want him to be right, and the fact that Mr. Fouts didn't do anything legally. So I shut my mouth and ignored Mr. Fouts for the rest of the first semester, and we went back to how gym usually went, and the girls were still hanging with Mr. Fouts. Then he left to be a firefighter and just never returned. I still hear that girls are friends with him on social media and stuff, but I guarantee you he screwed one of those girls. I'm sure of it. He's one of the reasons I stopped playing sports, which sucks because I loved it. But I now can't stand being called Lolita or people talking about my running. I live in a town which is a lot like a party town, so people come here in the summer to swim in the lake, drink, and party a lot, and then as the autumn hits, the tourists go home and the town is silent and peaceful again. Last summer, I was in the city center waiting for my boyfriend to pick me up and go to a trip near the town in the afternoon. I waited in front of a shopping center, so I stood there for about 10 minutes and saw people passing by. There were also some friends who had just got out of the shopping center, and then suddenly this old man who seemed to be in his 60s approached me. To be honest, my first thought was that he was a homeless person because he had dirty-looking clothes and long, dry hair. Also, he was wearing jeans and a jacket in the middle of the summer, so this was a bit of a red flag to me. To tell about myself, I'm a 20-year-old, tall, sporty-built girl with copper-red hair. I can say that I am pretty harsh with beggars and creeps, otherwise you can't get rid of them. So, this man stood in front of me and asked where some good restaurants are nearby. He spoke in English, so I thought maybe he's not a homeless person, and I told him nicely about the restaurants. I used to guide tourists, so it wasn't odd to me, but the odd things happened just after this. He thanked me for the advice, and I thought he would go on his way, but he stayed. He looked me up and down and started to introduce himself. He told me his name and that he was from France, but he didn't have a French accent, and asked if I was waiting for someone. I thought that he just wanted to small talk a bit. In my country, not many people speak English well, so they'd rather pretend to not know a word in that language, and it would be nice to a foreigner to speak a bit with someone. So I said yes. I said I was waiting for my boyfriend. He seemed a bit upset after I mentioned my boyfriend. He asked my name, my age, and my gut told me to get the hell out of there, and I lied about both my name and my age. I said I was 16. I don't look like I'm 20 years old anyway, and I wanted to keep my age in the illegal intervals, just in case. He asked if my boyfriend had a car, and what kind of car. I obviously didn't tell him, so I lied again. How old is he? I told him that he was 25. He's 20 as well. I didn't want to be a drama queen, so I pretended to be calm, but all of my nerves screamed at this point. I looked for some familiar people on the street, but there weren't any there. Suddenly, the man grabbed my hand and held it in his hand, and then asked if I would grab a drink with him. I ripped my hand out of his and told him no, asked him what he was thinking, and told him to screw off. I didn't wait for him to leave, so I was the one who left first, and at a super speed I started walking to the nearby skate park, because I knew some of my friends spend a lot of time there. Also, the skate park is right next to the police station. I didn't have the nerve to look behind me, so I just walked as fast as possible. There was no one that I knew at the time, but I saw these boys, sometimes here with my friends, and there also were some who I saw at the high school a few years ago. So I sat on the bench next to some skater's backpack, and then I looked back. The man was on the other side of the street, and he looked directly at me. The boys at the park approached me because they told me that I was pale, and they asked me if I was okay. I told them about the man on the other side of the street, and when everyone looked up at him, he finally left. My boyfriend arrived 2 minutes later. I texted him where I was before. He was in a traffic jam, so that's why he was late, but it's not a weird thing. There's lots of traffic jams here in the summer. So I don't know what it was that man wanted, and what could have happened if I didn't go to the park. I thought after that maybe I overreacted with the whole situation, but I don't know. Something was really not right with that man. Anyways, I'll never forget the look on his face while he talked to me, and he talked so quiet, and I really just don't know why. And this story happened to me a few years ago, and sometimes still makes me anxious. I tried posting this to Let's Not Meet, and they said it would be better here, so here we are. I had this classmate who skipped most of the classes until the final 2 months of school, and we were like 13 at the time, so everyone thought this was super strange because her mom had been notified by the school a lot of times, and she would still not come in. In those last 2 months where she actually attended, we got close, because we both liked anime, and since she was also a girl, I felt much more comfortable talking about it with her than my male classmates, as I was still terrified of men after a essay incident that happened with a friend of my dad. One day, we went together to my martial arts class because she wanted to see how it was. And she kept a plastic container that I couldn't see through, and a card in a plastic bag. I thought about it, but since she avoided the question, I left it as it was. When we left the class, she gave me the bag, and it had a Snickers in the box, and the card had a pressed flower inside with a confession. She asked me to be her girlfriend, to which I politely declined, since I had no romantic feelings for her. After that, it got awkward, and I hurried to leave her by the building's door and left. After that, she started skipping class again, and I was thankful because I didn't know how to act with her. Sometime later in the last days of school that year, I discovered that before she asked me, she spread to the whole school how she felt about me, and outed me as bisexual for everyone in the school, even though my tight-knit class of 8 people were the only ones I had come out to. And on one of the days that she did attend, she tried to get everyone to pity her and pressure me into giving up and start dating her. Creepy, but okay. She moved schools and I didn't hear from her for some time, until I started bumping into her a lot when I went out, which wasn't really that strange since we lived close by. After New Year's, but before classes got back, I had to go to the store to get some things for dinner that my mom asked me to, and when I got home, I saw a message from her saying she saw me leave when she was walking around my block, and to see if she could know where I was, and then proceeded to follow me to the supermarket and take a picture of me, with said picture of me trying to choose vegetables attached. I freaked out and showed it to my dad, saying that I was afraid and asked if we could get a restraining order or something, but he said it wasn't necessary since there was nothing she could do to me, as we were both teenagers. I didn't block her since I wanted to know if she would send me something else, but she didn't send anything after that. And when I thought I was safe and that she had given up, she appeared in my martial arts class with her elderly grandmother and kept asking to be paired up with me. I was terrified and paired with my friend, who was a very nice elderly lady, as soon as I could, and she had to be paired up with her grandmother. After that, she vanished. I never ran into her again, never received another message, she never showed up there again, and when class got back, I discovered that she had apparently moved with her mother to another state. I was in my late teens to early 20s when this happened. My boyfriend at the time had been flagged down by our neighbor at the top of our street because he would drive fast down the road sometimes. The man freaked out at him one day, and from then on, that neighbor didn't like us. I agree with the lead foot, but he was rather rude about the whole interaction. From then on, we kept to ourselves and ignored this guy because of his aggressive and weird vibe. One night, 2 of our friends came over, and they asked if we wanted to walk over to the airfield/golf course area near our house, and we agreed. I was feeling ill all day with a horrible stomach ache, and after about an hour of hanging around, I asked if we could all, as a group, please go back to the house. They were hesitant because the night was young to them, but agreed. We get to the top of my street, and I feel my stomach churning, and I tell our friends to meet us at the house while my boyfriend helped me. They walk ahead. At this point, we're in front of that neighbor's house across the street, and I start violently puking in the bushes trying to catch my breath. My boyfriend is aiding me and patting my back and rubbing in circles. I notice that he stopped. He freezes and then very quietly says to me, "Let's go, come on, right now." I instantly shudder because of his tone drop. I'm still throwing up at this point, so it's a bit difficult for me to think about walking. I think I said something like, "I can't, just wait for me." And he quietly says through his teeth in a slight panic, "Now." At this point, I'm terrified. I start walking with him and he says, "Walk normally, stay at my pace. I'll tell you when we get to the house." Apparently, that neighbor was creeping around near us when I was sick on the road. It was after midnight at this point. He said that he saw him outside in the dark in his driveway and didn't think that we noticed him. But my boyfriend said that he saw this man crouch and walk around his car in the driveway watching us. That's it, just watching. The crouching and hiding is what freaked me out. The man was already off and just weird, and the whole thing just weirds me out to this day. So that was this week's collection of creepy encounter and stalker stories. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this collection as much as one can enjoy this kind of collection. Stuff's kind of creepy, to be honest with you. But as always, there is a bit of an educational aspect to these stories, these creepy encounters. If they can help anybody possibly get out of a situation where things are sketchy, maybe if you're sitting in a sketchy situation, you start to think, I remember a story like this on one of his videos, then, I'm just saying. I'm not saying that these are educational, just saying if they can help people have a better view of their world and the surroundings, then they've done their job, right? Well, that said, friends, if you did enjoy this, please do consider hitting that thumbs up button. I would really appreciate that. And if you really liked the video, you can leave a comment down below letting me know your thoughts. Which story you preferred the most. I don't know. I was trying to think of something like your favorite something, but I got nothing right now, so maybe next time. You can also subscribe to the channel if you're new and liked what you heard. If you're not new, please don't hit that subscribe button. It will unsubscribe you, and that makes me sad. And yeah, you can support by going to join down below or going to my Patreon, which is also listed down in the description, where for $1 a month you can get early access to content like this. Yeah, all that good stuff. You guys know the deal by now. All that said, friends, I hope you have a beautiful day. And I hope I will see you on the next video. But, of course, until that moment happens to be upon us, I hope that you sleep well.